Welcome to episode 31 of 100 Years of Marine Corps Tankers, a station dedicated to honoring the legacy of Marine tankers and remembering the stories of what made the community special, told through those words of the Marines that towed the line. Joining the channel today is a Marine tanker who stands proud as the president of the Vietnam Tankers Association as a result of his distinguished service during the Vietnam War. Welcome to the channel, Sergeant John Wear.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you. It's my absolute honor to have you on. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Let's start at the beginning. So having been raised by a father that served 30 years as an Air Force colonel, just how did it come to be that you enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1966?
Well, let me start at the beginning. I was kind of practicing this a little bit. My mother told me about this. I didn't realize my dad was in the Air Force for 30 years and we were overseas quite often and we had Department of Defense schools. And I didn't know this, but this isn't a general statement, but I tend to paint with a wide paintbrush, but many teachers who come to military schools to teach are probably as much interested in visiting the country as they are teaching the children. And it's just it is what it is. And so my parents realized that I really hadn't had a very good elementary and junior high school education. So when we got transferred to Syracuse, New York, I ended up going to a military school, an Army ROT's military school for 9th grade. And I really liked it and I learned how to study, and I didn't do that well in school, but I did well. And then when we moved to Colorado, I decided I wanted to continue my military school education. So I ended up going down to New Mexico Military Institute down in Roswell, and I had 4 years of ROTC, Army ROTC. And my dad was in the Air Force. Most of my father's friends were in the Air Force. And I just figured I was probably going to end up being an Air Force officer. So I get to college my first year and I'm really not happy. I had a great social life, but my studies were not that great. And my parents really wanted me to transfer to a different school, to a real business school. And I really didn't want to transfer, and I joined a fraternity and yada, yada, yada. So finally, one day in the afternoon of a spring day, I went down to the Army recruiter and he was closed. He was out visiting. It was a one-man office and he was in Greeley, Colorado, and he was out visiting a high school. I went across the way to the Air Force recruiter and he was closed. And I went into the Navy recruiter, and the Navy recruiter, now again, I was in military school for a couple of years, so I kind of know, what, I guess the Army calls it strack, what the gung-ho looks. And this Navy recruiter had hair hanging down over his collar. And I thought, no way. So I walked out on the Navy recruiter, and here's this big, heavy set Army, Marine sergeant with a bunch of fruit salad on his shoulder. And he says, "You man enough to be a Marine?" And I puffed out my little 130-pound chest and I said, "Sign me up." So I made the decision. I didn't really sign up that day, but I made the decision. And about 3 or 4 months later, my sister was graduating from college. And so my parents came up to the college, and I took both my parents aside and I said, "I'm going to go in the Marines." Mm-hmm. And my dad then took me aside and he said, "Son, I've been in the Air Force for 30 years, but I've met a lot of really top-notch Marine officers." He said, "If I had it to do over," I'm getting goosebumps saying this, "if I had it to do over again, I'd be a Marine." And that was it. That checked off the Marine thing. I mean, just, I really was going to be in the Army. I was going to be in the Air Force, never be in the Navy, but I was going to be a Marine. So by the way, I had also had a cousin that had been in the Marines earlier during peacetime, but he'd been in Japan. When we were in Japan, he was in Japan. So, and he was my oldest cousin. So it was really kind of a goal to meet. Right. Anyway, so that's how I got to be in the Marines.
Yeah, we have some really striking similarities. My father was in the Air Force.
Okay.
And when I told him I was going to join the Marine Corps, and I told him I was going to enlist, he told me I was flat out crazy. He said, "You are absolutely crazy." And 17 years later, I think he may have finally realized that I might not have been as crazy as he thought. But no, that's really funny. That's a great story.
Well, and I've had friends that had sons who wanted to be a Marine, and because they knew I was a Marine veteran, the kid would ask me about being in the Marines, and they'd go home and tell their mom, and the mom would call me up and say, "What are you doing? You're signing my son's death warrant." So I said, "Come on." I said, "The kid's going to be great. He's going to, he's going to have goals and objectives, and he's going to be a man. He's going to, he's going to be in a command position. He's follow the rules. He's going to be a great person. And the ones that did, they thanked me afterwards, but it's just, it is what it is. Anyway.
So we got the story on how you became a Marine. Did you know right from the beginning that you wanted to be a Marine Corps tanker?
I'm in boot camp. It's September-ish, 1966, and we're at Edison Range at Camp Pendleton. And the bleacher we were sitting on, listening to the schoolhouse, faced the beach. And Amtraks and tanks from the tank school, which we'll get into in a little bit. But the tank school were going, the Marines, the tanks and the Amtraks were going up and down the beach. And we were fairly close, but not right on it. And I leaned over to one of my buddies and I said, I'm going to be in tanks. And he said, no way. He said, no way. Now, let me back up a little bit. When I joined, the Marine Corps was having a hard time getting recruits because the draft was going wild, and it was 2 years, and the Marine Corps was 4. They changed and had a 3 and a 2-year enlistment. I signed up for 2 years just to see what it was going to be like. And I liked it. I would have stayed in and gone to OCS or whatever, but that was kind of the plan. And so I'm at the rifle range and told this guy I was going to be a tanker, and he said, no way. And of course, that, just like the gunny saying, are you man enough to be a Marine? That was my challenge. So about the last week of boot camp, and I think boot camp at that time was 10 weeks. The last week of boot camp, the series gunnery sergeant came out to the street. This was in San Diego at the Quonset huts that we were in. And he bellows out and he says, all you 2-year pukes, get out on the road. So all the 2-year Marines came out to the company street, and he said, all right, you 2-year pukes, Uncle Sam needs his money worth out of you for making you a killer. So we're going to send you to Vietnam and you're going to be a grunt. And I raised my hand and asked permission to speak. And he said, speak. And I said, how can I remedy these things? He says, give me a year. So I shipped over in boot camp a year to be a tanker because I didn't want to be a grunt. And that was what I did. Realizing that I probably could have gone into the air wing or office pogue or, supply sergeant or whatever, but it was fine. It was good.
1967, the notes here say that you graduated from tank school in Camp Del Mar, which I found to be interesting because having come from Camp Pendleton, Alpha Company for tanks now, I didn't know that in 67, the tank school was there. I always thought it had kind of started at Knox and then ultimately, unfortunately ended at Benning. But when and how do you know the background with it being in Del Mar?
I don't know the very specifics, but I believe that around the time that Vietnam started. Before that, it was OJT. You went from boot camp and ITR to the tank battalion and you did OJT. But I think during Vietnam, they decided that they needed some tank crewman course. And I think it was only 4 or 5 weeks. It wasn't that long, but it was at Del Mar. And because Amtrak's was already there and it was a tracked vehicle school, they decided to go ahead and put tanks in there. So we were in there. And I don't remember when they converted to Knox, but it wasn't that much longer after Vietnam was over. So, 73, 75, it went over to Knox, and they decided to have it with the Army.
Graduating from tank school, you then reported to 5th Tank Battalion at Camp Flores, where you served from March 1967 to December. And it was here that you rose through the ranks and eventually attained the rank of corporal. What bills did you have while at 5th Tanks in 1967?
So when I first got there, 5th Marine Division had really just started developing. They'd taken 26 Marines and Alpha Company, 5th Tanks, and already gone over to Vietnam. But when we got in there, I'm pretty sure, I don't know how many racks were in the barracks, but let's just say there were 40 guys in each one of the squad bays. And I think maybe there were 6 or 8 of us in a squad bay. And eventually, as a school, it was really bare bones for a while, but we had plenty of tanks. I was a tank crewman, and I happened to be on the platoon leaders. I was on Alpha 1-1, so I was on gun tank. Probably most of the time I was a gunner. I think I'd had college boot camp, or excuse me, ROTC. So I think I was a little more gung ho, maybe a little more, whatever you call it. So I pretty much, I don't think I ever was driver or in the States. I don't think I was ever driver or loader. other than when the regular TC, when the platoon leader took over the tank and the regular TC, ended up being gunner or whatever. But I, 18 months that I was there, we would go out to the firing range outside of Las Pogas, the gun range. We'd go out there, gosh, probably every 2 months and shoot. And one time the battalion commander was there, and there was several lance corporal gunners in our platoon or our tank and our company. And the battalion commander was so impressed with our gunnery that he made everybody a corporal. So, I mean, like, there was no lance corporals left in the company. It was everybody was a corporal. And of course, around that same time, we were getting lance corporals and sergeants back from Vietnam. And of course, those guys were the salts, and it was really, you really looked up to them. And they of course, they were more senior in grade, but it was a really interesting time. And during that time, a career NCO decided, talked me into going to OCS and to apply for OCS. I'd had a year of college, and I'd taken some classes and some courses. They qualified me in having 3 years of college. Don't ask me how that test worked out. But anyway, so I applied for OCS. And about 2 months after that, I decided that rather than being a boot lieutenant that had that had a firewatch ribbon and nothing else on my uniform, that I probably ought to go over to Vietnam and get some experience before I become an officer. So I requested, I took away my request for the OCS and put in for Vietnam. The first sergeant at the time, again, they had sent me to embarkation school. They sent me to MBC school. They sent me to several other schools. And in that period of time that I was at 5th Tanks. And so I ended up being the NBC NCO and the training NCO. And so I had an office in the company office, probably the last 4 or 5 months that I was at 5th Tanks. And the first sergeant said, "Where, you're not going anywhere unless you find a replacement." And it turned out that my bunkie, who I still am in contact with, Richard Zuley, his brother was in Vietnam, so Richard couldn't go. And he was a set 2-year guy. And I said, "Dick, would you take over the training NCO?" And he goes, "Sure, I'll do it." So boom. So I went to staging battalion. In December, I went to staging battalion, which is all the MOSs for going to Vietnam. All of them all went and trained, and we did a little bit of escape and evasion, and we did nighttime, patrolling, and we, attacked a Vietnamese village and probed for mines and did all the kinds of little, grunt things that you have to do to get prepared to go over to Vietnam. And of course, it was kind of silly because there was no MOS specific training at all. It was all, the guy next to me was, and the guy on the other side of me was an ammo tech. So there was no, getting tanks ready. But I'd spent, again, over a year training at Camp Pendleton, so that when I got there, I knew a lot about the tank and the maintenance of the tank. And if you hear a funny noise, you stop and get it fixed, and those kinds of things that possibly people on OJT might not have. And going over there as a corporal, it was different. I didn't have to, we call them burning the shitters. When you have to, I didn't burn the shitters, and I didn't have any working parties and all those kinds of things, which is kind of nice that you can really concentrate on being a tanker and a tank commander and a section leader and whatever. So that's it.
So that takes us to January of 1968, where you deployed, like you'd mentioned, with not 5th, but 3rd Tank Battalion to Vietnam. You touched on it a little bit, but can you describe what it was like to prepare for and ultimately ship out to Vietnam? Because by 68, obviously, I think the word back here in the States, you had guys coming back, you guys telling stories. So there was no secret what you were about to get into. Maybe not to the level and to the extent that you ultimately did. But I'm sure, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I'm speaking for you here, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm sure at that point you kind of knew what you were about ready to do. So how do you prepare for that?
Well, first of all, from the day we got off the bus at MCRD San Diego and stepped in the yellow footprints, we were going to war. And so there was never, I mean, virtually never. And I tell you, somebody went to Marine Barracks in Adak, Alaska from 5th Tanks. And, everybody laughed up their sleeves at this guy that, because he's pardon me, but he's a pussy, just, you're going to go to combat. And that's just the way it is.
Right.
I don't remember ever having second thoughts until my first firefight. I didn't really have second thoughts about, I mean, we were indestructible. And of course we were, bulletproof. So, and being, 19, 20 years old and having the kind of training, it didn't matter. It really, really didn't matter. And tanks, like you said, you ain't tanks, you ain't shit. It just, it's just the way it is. And so I didn't, again, not until my first firefight, when my pucker string went up, I just really, it didn't faze me. It really didn't faze me at all when I think about it. And I've thought about it a lot. And I've written a lot of stories about my time in Vietnam and time in the Marine Corps because of the Vietnam Tankers Association and I've talked to a lot of guys. We've been around since 1999. And so there's been a lot of cohesion among the group, and there's 500 members. So it's pretty spectacular.
So as a corporal here now, the notes didn't specify, but were you the tank commander of the flame tank when you deployed?
No.
Okay.
I got to Vietnam without looking at my SRB. It's probably about the 25th of January. Okay. And the 30th of January, 31st of January, I went to Phu Bai. Phu Bai was north of Da Nang and south of Quang Tri, 15, 20 miles from the DMZ. And that's where 3rd Marine Division's headquarters had been for 3 years. And they finally moved up to Dong, which again was about probably 15 miles north. They moved up there, the whole headquarters, but the rear element was still at Phu Bai. So I came in to Phu Bai, and about 2 days or 3 days after I got there, the last 4 tanks left Phu Bai to go up to Hue City to the ramp, the Navy LSD ramp, LCU ramp, to get on boats to go up to Dong Ha, to be motored up to Dong Ha. And that was the 31st of January. And that was the first day of Tet. And the tanks were gone. And of course, would have liked to have been on one of the tanks, but they already had a crew in the crews. So I stayed back in the back, in the rear, waiting for orders. And of course, Tet, everything went wild. So nothing was happening in Phu Bai. So I was standing on the doing perimeter watch and eating in the mess hall and most of the hooches, they had hardback hooches and they were empty. And once in a while, a fellow would come back going on his way home, and I'd sit there and pick their brain about, what to do. And, most of them just said, keep your head down, just keep your head down. That's the most important thing you can do. Anyway, on the 5th of January, they had a call out. The office pogue called me and 2 other tankers out and said, go down to the helicopter ramp, take your equipment, go down to the helicopter ramp. You're going into Hue. You're going to be a replacement. So I hate heights. And we got down, and the 46 came down and didn't even land. It just came down, dropped the ramp. We got in, the ramp went up, we went up, and we picked up a couple pallets of mortar rounds on a hook and went into Hue City. And the pallet was swinging back and forth, and the 46 was swinging back and forth. I was way more worried about the helicopter crashing than anything that I was going into at the time. And of course, I had no idea what was going on in Hue City at the time. Even though them, there's a big firefight, but anyway, so we land, we drop the load, and then we land, and we come out of the helicopter, and hey, we're out on this near the river, and the North Vietnamese are shooting at us from the other side of the river, and we're trying to dodge course, the Marines are shooting back, and we're trying to cross over the fire. And finally, stop shooting. And we run across and stop. It was pretty hairy. Anyway, we got to the tanks. We get around the corner and find out that the tanks are at the MAC-V compound. And if you read Mark Bowden's book or anything about Way, the MAC-V compound, really, for the first 2 days of the battle, that was the Alamo. There was nothing, there were no Americans anywhere else in the city except for the Alamo. And the Marines that came up and the 4 tanks that had left on the 31st, they came up and they were in the Alamo, and they finally broke out and started going, nobody knew anything about urban combat. I mean, nobody had done urban combat since Seoul, Korea. So Incheon and Seoul, Korea. So in fact, one of our platoon sergeants had been a tanker in Korea. And the only thing I remember him telling me is they used to sit in their M4s, they're Sherman tanks. And the bad guys, the Koreans would go by in their tank and they'd pull out and shoot them in the rear. And that's the only way they could knock them out, was a 75 millimeter gun. And just wild. Anyway, so we got to the tank park, and we had a lieutenant. The tanks that had left to go up to the LCU ramp, they had come up and they got to a big circle in the road, and all around the circle there were Vietnamese tanks blown up and on fire, and the guys, I mean, most of these guys were from the rear. They were Yankee 2-1, Yankee 5-1, and Yankee 5-2, which was the battalion commander and the battalion XO's tanks, and then 2 flame tanks. They had been in the rear the whole time. They hadn't really been out in the field. Even the corporals that were there. One corporal had been shot at some hall, and he ended up getting killed. But anyway, so they got to this circle, and they went, holy shit. And there was nobody with them. There was no staff NCOs or officers or whatever. So they turned around and they went down the road, maybe a mile, and they sat by the side of the road. And that's when the Task Force X-Ray with General Christmas, that was I think a captain at the time, they came up, and it was a 1-1. Alpha 1-1 actually was the first Marine combat unit, if you will, to come up to Hue. And they the tankers decided that they joined the column. And of course, I'm sure Christmas said, "You better get with me." So anyway, they went in and they fought. And it was just, there was a lot of sitting behind a building, letting the grunts go out. As soon as they hit some resistance, they pull back, the tank would pull up and shoot and pull back. And it was a lot of this leapfrogging that we did over there. And I tell you, the first time I went out, now, let me back up. The lieutenant that was our platoon leader had come up earlier, and he said, "Corporal Wear, I hope you understand that you're brand new." And we call them FNGs, new guys. So he said, "You're an FNG, and I can't give you a tank." So I had a Lance Corporal as my tank commander, and he lasted about 4 days and got shot. But anyway, so I said, "Fine, I'd rather be inside the tank." He said, "We don't have a gun tank for you, so we only have a flame tank." I said, "Fine, whatever, because the tank's a tank." Then we went out, the next morning we went out, and the bullets, the machine gun bullets, the North Vietnamese bullets hitting the tank, I'd never heard that before. And it was just pucker string time. And flame tank has this little teeny telescope, there's no vision box, there's no wide angle, for a machine gun. So that I was looking through this tiny little periscope, and the tank commander, the lieutenant, the Lance Corporal, called him Scooby. He said, "We are bringing over to the left." So I started going to the left. He said, "No, faster, faster." And all of a sudden I saw people running across. He shoot them, and it wasn't like the movies, it was teeth, eyes, and hairs and pink mist all over the place. And of course, the gun tank immediately shot a canister at them at the same time. But the tank that I was on had already expended their napalm load, which we can get into in a little bit, but they had already expended their napalm load. So we were basically a 52-ton machine gun platform. And the 50 really, because of the way the 50 was mounted, do you know how the 50 was mounted on an M48? Was sideways?
No, I didn't know that.
Okay, they weren't sky mounted. They were mounted inside the tank commander's cupola, and they were sideways.
Okay.
And so the links would go out this way and jam, and the out this way and get down and get into the turret. So
Okay.
you could shoot about 3 rounds, have to clear it out 3 rounds. So the 50, a weapon that got used hardly ever at all. And we really didn't, where we were, because we kept them inside the cupolas, because we got incoming artillery and we got incoming mortars. And so you didn't want to be out there when, so,
Right.
and it wasn't, there was no remote control for the machine gun. You had to press the trigger to make it go. So
Okay.
basically the 30 caliber, and it was a 30 that we had, we didn't 7.62. We had a old 30 caliber, air cooled 30 caliber that was the coax machine gun. And that's what we shot. And we shot hundreds of thousands of machine gun rounds.
Wow.
We had a mail bag, brass bag. There was a big giant mail bag, and we filled that probably every 2 days. Yeah.
Did the flame tank eventually get napalm, or for the remainder of the fight, did you stay as,
well, here's a story for you. Okay. About 2 days into the battle, the guy that's the tank commander of the tank that I was on had been wounded and got medevaced. But just prior to him getting wounded, he's driving down the road. They were told, rules of engagement, the Vietnamese did not want their city destroyed, so that you had to call in anything higher than a M16 or a 30 caliber. You had to call it in and get permission to fire. Yeah, this was early on in the battle, probably the first 4 or 5 days. Anyway, so he's driving along, and the grunts are next to him, and they're going along, and out of a building, a shit pot load of North Vietnamese start shooting down at them. And I mean, there's guys getting ripped up, and Charlie West traverses the turret and says, shoot a rod. And he shot a rod of napalm, probably 10, 15 seconds worth of napalm into the building, and then lit it. The whole city block burned.
Wow.
And he had expended the whole load. It was, by the way, it's 360 gallons of napalm, 360 gallons, which is 360 gallons is 8.3 pounds per gallon, which is 2,008 pounds of napalm. But it's in a huge bottle inside where the loader and where the breech and the all that stuff would be. I mean, it's the turret was barely wide enough for your shoulders to go down into the gunner's seat. The rest was all this gigantic napalm bottle. The napalm bottle was probably 4 inches, maybe 6 inches of steel. So you not only had to penetrate the side of the tank, which was 3 inches or 2 inches, but you also had to penetrate, if you could, you had to penetrate the bottle. We never, other than mines, we never had a bottle go up because of an RPG.
Okay.
So anyway, Charlie West burns down the city, and they said no more napalm. So they wouldn't allow gas trucks or air compressors, and they had these huge air compressors that give us 3,000 pounds of pressure. We'd have it down to about 350 pounds to shoot the napalm. But we went through the napalm. We went through the battle without being able to shoot the napalm.
Okay.
And then right before we left, they brought in, and we mixed a load. And so when we left, we had at least had a load to be able to go on the road.
I've read some stories on Hue City. I know the enemy there you had many different faces of enemy as they kind of flowed in. Can you talk a little bit to that and the different types of forces that you all, because I mean that became, the way I understood it, kind of the strong point and one of the most significant battles of the war, where the North Vietnamese really kind of tried to stack the deck and brought in a lot of different, I'm not exactly sure what units they brought in, but I know those units were highly trained individuals, vice some of the folks that were fighting out of the places. Is that an accurate statement?
I was a 1 week, 2 week in country snuffy corporal. I inside the flame tank in a gunner seat. I have no idea. I mean, while I was there, I had no idea. They shot at you, you shot back. That was basically, and so, I mean, the grunts captured some Chinese advisors that were there and ended up getting burned up. No, perhaps a general or a colonel or maybe a lieutenant colonel might be able to, they've been able to study the battle, et cetera. But while I was there, I've read a lot of books. In fact, probably the best book about Hue City is Hue 1968 by Mark Bowden, the guy that wrote Black Hawk Down. That's probably the best one. And of course, I'm in it, so it's even better. But
yeah.
But it's books. He spent 2 years talking to Marine veterans that were in Hue. And then he went over to Vietnam and spent almost 2 full years talking to the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong who fought in the city. So it's really an interesting perspective. And he talks about some of the ways that the North Vietnamese were, dispatching their troops and seeing the tanks coming and, that kind of stuff. It was really very, very interesting book. But we were there till the 14th or 15th of February. And by then, been 2 weeks, and by then the South Side was declared, even though it wasn't, but declared pacified. And there were just some elements left to clean up. And they decided to go ahead and try to attack the Citadel on the side. And a platoon of tanks from First Tanks came up on Mike boats and dispatched and went there. So we were relieved, if you will, and got on boats and went up to Quang Tri. And when I was just telling this to one of my buddies the other day, when we got, which was the rear area of a 3rd Tank Battalion, where the maintenance yard was, we drove in, and my old platoon leader from Camp Pendleton was there, and it was kind of like a homecoming. And he was pretty proud of the fact that one of his boys was in Hue. But it took them 3 days to weld up all the holes, the RPG holes. They take a big bolt and stick it in the hole and then weld around it. And there were RPG holes all over the tanks. And of course, being a new guy, I didn't notice any of that stuff. I just get in the tank, let's go,
Right.
Oh my God, we're getting shot at. And there were RPG holes everywhere. It was amazing. And thankfully, most of them were probably Chinese in origin, so that they didn't penetrate. A lot of the Chinese weapons were subpar, and they splatter on the side of the tank.
One of the things you had mentioned, I found interesting, and something I didn't know prior to this discussion. You had mentioned we will reference Hue when talking about tank infantry integration, and as you will know, Iraq and a little bit in Afghanistan, but mainly in Iraq, tank infantry integration became a very important task for both the infantry and the tankers. You'd mentioned that there you all were leapfrogging, and I find that to be interesting because, we preached synchronization and moving as one unit and operating as one unit. It doesn't sound like you all did that. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
The biggest problem my entire 3-year Marine career as a tanker, most most lieutenants and captains had virtually no experience with tanks. They had no idea their capabilities. In fact, I believe it was Christmas, Ron Christmas, I heard him on the radio, and pardon my French, but he said, "Get those big fucking RPG magnets away from my men." He didn't want tanks near him. He wanted his men to be able to go and whatever. I just think there was a huge lack of tank infantry coordination, and God bless them. The grunts just figured they could do it without the help. And unless there was an actual firefight going on, we were really bastard children.
Hmm.
Once a firefight happened, boy, they loved us. They
Right.
wanted us right there shooting all the time. But any other time we break down and they'd have to leave a squad with us, but there was all kinds of, we run out of gas, whatever. And, tanks were a pain in the butt to a platoon leader or a company commander. And I only went on one operation where it was a massive, the entire 3rd Tank Battalion and the entire 9th Marine Regiment went on a huge sweep around into the DMZ. And that was the only time that other than Hue City, where there was really kick-ass infantry tank stuff going on.
Can you talk about that? Can you talk about that operation as to
Sure.
kind of the plan? Can you set the stage for us, the planning that goes into it?
Sure. Well, I just happened that I was at Cantien, which Cantien was a hill probably 2 miles from the DMZ. And in 1967, they get 1,000 to 2,000 rounds a day fired into Cantien. It was like Quezon, only even worse. This is a lot smaller, and there was no airfield, so there was no planes getting blown up or whatever. But it and I wasn't there then. It was just insane. It was absolutely insane. And I was there later when the siege slowed down a little bit. And of course, that was the Vietnamese wanted to take over Cantien. They wanted to take that high ground. First of all, they could put their artillery and shoot anywhere. They could shoot, 15, 20 miles in any direction. So they spent a lot of time bombarding it. And they attacked once and penetrated the perimeter and blew up an Amtrak and got beat back. And things that beat him back was a flame tank that just obliterated a battalion. Anyway, so this is about July of 1968. There really hadn't been a lot of action going on in the DMZ. Not a lot of patrols. They were trying to do a thing called arc lights, where B-52s, massive, 40 B-52s would drop their entire load on one area, and it's called an arc light.
Wow.
And to watch that, your fillings in your teeth would rattle. It was just absolutely mind-boggling. And a 1,000-pound bomb not only blows a lot of stuff up, but the concussion, it's amazing. So they were doing this in the DMZ all of May and June. And Operation Thor, besides going in to try to clear out a lot of the enemy bunkers and supply caches and stuff in the DMZ, they also wanted to assess the damage that the bombs were doing on the North Vietnamese. And to be honest with you, our force was so big that we had a lot of rear element firefights, but we really didn't have any major battles during that time. But when you have, 15 or 20 or 25 tanks going along the countryside, that's a lot of noise. Right. And the Vietnamese went back north. They crossed the river and got back up into North Vietnam. Also, in that Thor time, the rumor was that Operation Thor was going to clear out the DMZ, and then we were going to bring both 1st and 3rd Marine Division up to the DMZ, and we were going to attack the north. That's the rumor. Okay? I've since read in a book that the North Vietnamese heard about this. They moved their guns, their big 152 millimeter guns, 1 mile closer to the DMZ, and they shot into the Dong Ha ammo dump and destroyed it. It burned for 3 days. It destroyed the ammo dump. We had no beans. We had no bullets to be able to have the attack. And that's what they did. And it took about 2 months. My understanding is it took about 2 months to resupply dump with ammo. But the North Vietnamese heard about it and destroyed all the bombs and the bullets so that we couldn't have a major offensive in North Vietnam, which is too bad. But
right. And the notes here say that as you alluded, the remainder of your deployment, you were assigned to the northernmost part of Vietnam, especially right up against the DMZ.
Yeah.
What was your day-to-day activities like, and how tense was it being there? Obviously you know where you're at, and you just gone through Hue City, so you have that experience, and the risks associated. What was your day-to-day like?
Uh, Interesting. Just like you read with any combat, combat is weeks and months of absolute sheer boredom and minutes of sheer terror. That's what it's like. Now, one of the things that, and I've had a lot of conversations with some of my buddies about this. You never know when it's going to happen. And so you're always on edge unless you're in the rear, and there's hot shower and warm showers and all that kind of stuff. And you might get a little bit incoming, but there's no imminent ground attack. But when you're out snooping and pooping on the highway or going across country, you have no idea whether your name's got the RPG's got a name on it or there's a sniper with a bullet with your name on it.
Mhm.
So you are always 98% on edge, day and night. And I remember after Way getting to an area that they had a bunch of 105 and 155 self-propelleds shooting into the DMZ.
Mhm.
And they'd start at 9:00 in the morning and they'd go all night. And I finally went to the corpsman and I said, I got something wrong with my stomach. And he said, you need to relax. He said, you're too tense. You're listening to the guns go off and your stomach is tight as a drum. You're not going to calm down, know what is going on, be aware of your surroundings, and you'll be okay. And I was, but I had no idea. I mean, every time a gun would go off, it just, my stomach would like this. And that was just being a new guy and not understanding what was going on. So I'm Charlie West, the guy that got wounded, is back being the tank commander. And we're on a area. This is in the spring of 68. We're in a thing called Camlo Hill. We're on a bunch of hills. And it's a unit called Task Force Robbie. And the Marines didn't have enough tanks for all the different fire bases that they had in 1968 all around. So they decided to have a armored rapid reaction force that if Contien got hit, we'd charge up the road. If Quang Tri got hit, we'd charge down the road. If Camp Carroll. So they had some tanks on these bases, but not overwhelming force. So they had tanks from each one of the tank companies. Our flame tanks, we were on a section. They had Army truck-mounted quad 50s, 50 caliber machine guns on little tracks, which they were really they were anti-aircraft guns, but they used them. And they also had Sky Dusters, which are 40 millimeter, the old pom-pom guns. Those were mounted on tracks, and they were part of it. And we had Ontos, the 606 millimeter recoils. So that was pretty much, I mean, I don't think we got in a couple firefights, but nothing major. We got in no major battles. And part of the problem was that one time there was a major battle going on, at the Battle of Dong Ha, which had happened in April of 1968. We got alerted that this firefight was going to start, or was starting, and the 4th Marines were there. And it was a regiment of North Vietnamese who were coming down to attack this big, huge, sprawling base, and they stopped them. And we were going to go out to get in the firefight, and the North Vietnamese knew that, and Viet Cong knew that we were going to do that, and because we were rapid reaction force, they planted massive mines in this area, and our tank hit a mine. About 6 tanks hit mines. And I mean, and blew the track right off. I mean, it was big. They were big anti-tank mines. In fact, one of the buddies of mine who was a lieutenant Army commander, a pom-pom commander, it's a command detonated mine. We didn't hit the mine. The mine went off. They blew up the back part of our track. But we ended up sitting in Dong Ha, busting torsion bars and replacing road wheels while this firefight, and it was a 3-day firefight. It was 3 solid days, never stopped firing.
Wow. It
was absolutely amazing. Yeah. The grunts, you can read about it. It's called the Battle of Dong Ha, or Battle of An Loc, or Battle of Dai Do. It's all the same area. And about 4 months later, my company, we were dispatched to go up there, and we were just an armor blocking force in that area for about 4 months.
Okay.
Day late and a dollar short.
I kind of want to go back to Hue City for a moment. That whole offensive was how long? How many days was that?
The battle?
Yes.
28 days.
28 days. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And you were there for all 28 days?
No, it was 14.
14. Okay.
14 days. Our tanks, which we weren't even supposed to be there, and 3rd Tank Battalion wasn't supposed to be there. We were supposed to be up the DMZ. It was really supposed to be 1st Tank Battalion. And we were there by mistake, if you will. We got caught up in the fight. So 1st Marine Division said, we gotta get into the fight. So they sent up their own tanks, and they did the north side of the river where the Citadel was and the old city. And they got their butts kicked. They got their butts pretty badly kicked because it's a 1,000-year-old city, and the streets are tiny. Right. We were in the moderns. We were in like Paris. I mean, it was huge white boulevards and trees, and it was lovely. On that side, it was, if you can say it, but it was like being in a modern city, whereas the old city, it was really tough. They couldn't traverse the turret. Yeah, but we were our unit from 3rd Tank Battalion, which was 2 gun tanks and 2 flame tanks, and one of the gun tanks was knocked out, was blown up. So we had 1 gun tank and 2 flame tanks. What was left for fighting on the south side. So they decided that they bring a reinforced platoon. The iconic picture of Life magazine, I might have sent it to you, the picture where the grunts are on the side of the tank and one guy's holding the bottle up, and he's got a octopus on the side of his helmet. The tank, if you look really closely, there is this big heavy metal bar in the front of the tank, and it's a blade tank. We had blade tank. Did you have blade tanks?
We did, yes.
Okay, so it was a blade tank that happened to get the photograph of all the infantry, wounded infantry on it.
Now, after your time at the DMZ, how did you get out of country? What was your process for getting out of country? Were you did you do a rip there with other tankers, or did you withdraw your tank actually back?
Well, the last couple weeks of my deployment, we had we called it Rat Patrol. There was a main MSR, main supply route between Dong Ha and Quang Tri, and Quang Tri was where they had some of the docks that they could bring the goods in, so that they have to travel on the road. So they decided that we had to keep the road open. So we would do a gun tank and a flame tank would go up and down the road at night from sundown to sunup, and all kinds of hours. We'd go up and back at the same time, and then we sit for 2 hours, and then we come back and then sit for 15 minutes and go back. And so it was really irregular, but we kept the road open and kept them from mining the roads, which was probably the most important part of that. And one morning we're driving ahead of us, and we're driving in, and Hadler yells out from the company office, "Hey, Ware, your orders came in." So I said, okay. So I went into my hooch and got a Willie Peter bag and threw some of my stuff in there, and said goodbye to my guys and got my orders and went down to the flight line and went to Dong Ha, or went to Da Nang, and left.
And that service,
because staging battalion, before I left for Vietnam, staging battalion, I think it was 4 weeks. So we got to know each other pretty well, the office pogues and the whatever. So we came to Vietnam, gone. Everybody was gone. I don't think there was another tanker in the entire outfit. When I came back, 12 months and 29 days to the day that I came in country, I'm at the receiving barracks, the goodbye barracks at Da Nang. Don't you know, almost every single guy that came over with me was there.
Wow.
It was really amazing. And then whatever happened to Joe? Oh, he got blown up. What happened to so-and-so? Oh, he's in the hospital in Yokosuka, yada, yada, yada. But the majority of the guys came back in one piece. And I'll tell you one other little tidbit, and I think this is really cool. When we got off the plane, I think it was a Continental Airlines plane, and we're walking down to the receiving room or receiving barracks, and there's a whole group of dirty, nasty, needing haircuts, needing shaves, uniforms gross, leaving.
Hmm.
And they're all giving us cat calls. You'll be sorry. Yeah. FNG, FNG. Okay. 12 months and 29 days later, I'm in that line yelling at the FNGs. It was very cool. It was a very cool turnabout.
And when you came back to 5th Tanks, you were assigned to the flame tank section and opted for an early out program to go to college. And that takes us up to your active time as a Marine. But the story doesn't end there, because having lived a very successful life, and obviously, you still are representing your community very proudly as the Vietnam Tankers Association president. What advice do you have, and how do you think that being a Marine Corps tanker has helped you, from that time all the way through till now?
I've been thinking about that a little bit, but I think that probably because you're a crew, you're a working crew, and you have an obligation to each other, and you have a dedication to each other that a lot of other Marines might not have had close relationship. I mean, TC is almost like daddy. And the first thing that I'm going to tell you is that a Marine tanker should never feel like they're alone. And after having that kind of camaraderie inside a Iron Monster, you got to seek out those guys. And right now, 52 years later, all my best friends are guys I was in Vietnam with. Everybody else has fallen by the wayside. And those are the tried and true buddies. And 2 guys that were on my crew, I'm still in contact with.
Wow.
And we're still brothers. It's absolutely. But let me tell you, when I got back from Vietnam was not a popular war. And whenever I made the mistake of telling somebody I was a Marine veteran, they would go, "Oh, you're going to kill anybody?" I mean, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. So I went probably 30 years without mentioning that I had been in the Marines, had been in Vietnam, other than if I happened to bump into somebody wearing a Vietnam hat, which nobody wore Vietnam hats because you're a mad dog killer. It was really a horrible time in the United States at the time for the warriors. That, in fact, when I got back from Vietnam and landed at Los Angeles Airport, they wouldn't allow us into the airport. They put us on Navy buses and took us down to El Toro Air Base for us processing out. And I swear to you, I have no recollection from the time that I left El Toro to the time I got to my parents' house. I have no I haven't gone through therapy, but I have no recollection of leaving El Toro, whether I was in uniform or not, whether I got to the Los Angeles International Airport and got in a fight. I can't remember. I can't remember. And a lot of guys said that they did. They got in fights and, got spit on and whatever, but I don't remember any of that. So I don't know. I've repressed it somehow, but it wasn't that cool. And about the 3rd Marine Division was having a reunion in Philadelphia, and I was living in the Philadelphia area at the time. And I called up one of my old I'd gone to boot camp with, and I said, "Gary, come on out." "Oh, okay." And we hadn't really spent that much time together, but we talked on the phone a few times and sent Christmas parties. He showed up, and we both said, "This isn't so bad." And about 2 years later, a guy named Dick Carey wanted to have a reunion for Marine tankers. And I just happened to get a laptop computer. And so it was happenstance that he said, "Let's go to Washington and have a," so 76 of us got together, and my gunner and my best friend in Vietnam came to came to the reunion. I didn't know any of the other guys, but all 76 or whatever ended up being my brothers.
Nice.
And we're still almost the ones that are still alive, we're still really close. And that, tell you one other, my brother-in-law was dating my sister when I was a junior in high school. So I've known him since I was 16, 17 years old. And they're still married. And he used to come to our house in Pennsylvania and stay at our house when he was on business trips and things. And right after the Vietnam tankers' first reunion in 1999, he came to visit, and I started talking to him about the reunion, whatever. And he said, Johnny, how long have I known you? And I said, since I was 17. He goes, this is the first time you haven't been monosyllabic about Vietnam. And I started crying. I didn't realize how, and
Right.
so, and from then on, I mean, everything's great, but I didn't realize. And later when I was talking to my sister, she said, I was so afraid to ever bring up Vietnam with you because of your reactions. And I hadn't realized that I'd been that way. And so talking to some of the guys, the Afghanistan and Iraqi guys, it's okay. They won't understand you. And so you're going to have to talk to another tanker. They understand what you're talking about, but maybe what they're talking about and what you're talking about and what this other guy's talking about, maybe you can put a story together to where you could tell the story and it isn't all blood and guts and gore and whatever. And you can talk to civilians about it and whatever, but it takes a while. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
I mean, I have to tell you that what you all went through was absolutely incredible. And this nation owes you a debt of gratitude. And it's been a long time coming. Having come home with the yellow ribbons and the flowers and the balloons and all that, yeah, you're still coming back from combat, but you're coming back to a very different nation. And I can't even imagine what it was like getting off that plane. So for you and your association and all your brothers, I have to say thank you. You guys absolutely paved the way for this generation of tanker. And I can't say enough.
And I tell you, when I do talk to younger tankers and more modern tankers, I'm in awe of how much respect they have and how they listen to every word and those kinds of things. I mean, we had a couple mini reunions down at the Fort Benning at the tank school, and the colonel, they served us lunch, and the colonel told us we had to sit every other seat. And they brought in the students, and the students sat in between us. And it was just, the kids' eyes were as big as saucers, and they were, hey, Charlie, listen to this guy. And, you talk a little story about something that happened in Vietnam. It was just so cool. I mean, it's just, so gratifying. Kind of like the old Indian chief that's sitting there talking, a battle with Custer, whatever, just very cool. Very cool.
Well, it's one thing to walk down the halls of Benning and have, the pictures from Vietnam, and the photographs of the tanks. And I will say that the flame tank, the one picture with the flame tank lighting up the jungle there, is probably one of my favorite tank pictures of all time. I'm a huge flame tank fan, although after hearing some stories about it, I'm not sure that I would necessarily want to be inside of one. But the opportunity to sit down with gentlemen like yourself that actually were there and done that. I mean, that picture that hangs on the wall as you walk past as a young Marine, as a student walking past there, comes to life. And it's invaluable. And these stories that you all have told, and there's no secret that you've been the behind the scenes working the interviews for me. So I need to publicly thank you for that as well. But thank you for these stories, because you have taken something that has been either something we've read about or something that we've saw on television or the documentaries, and just put a very personal touch on it. And I really do appreciate that. However, I'm going to flip the switch here for a second. As you know, this channel has a message. And as someone who has been extremely successful, both in and out of uniform, as well as continued community service, what message do you have for today's Marines?
My message? It's tough. Almost all of us are going to get out of the military, get a job, family if you haven't already, and have a mortgage, and life is going to really get in the way. And I think that if we can keep our eye on the ball, on the prize, and the prize is that 40 years from now, there's probably going to be, and if there isn't already, an Iraqi USMC Iraqi Tankers Association, and there is a Marine Corps Tanker Association, or an Afghanistan Tanker Association. There's got to be. It's so important to tell your story like you're doing, but to tell the story and to get those stories out there and to get them cataloged and get them chronicled and let the public know. And our 75 interviews that we have on our website, on the Marine Corps USMC Vietnam Tankers website, we have some of our interviews have had 7,000 views. And that's not all just tankers looking at them. And who knows if it's the entire show that they watched, but we've had 7,000, 8,000 views on some of our shows, so that we're getting the word out. We're getting the word out. And so my advice is you got to keep, I think, really don't bury it. Keep your eye on the fact that, I mean, whether it's 12 years or 4 years or 15 years or 30 years as a Marine tanker, they're going away. Yeah. We're going away. And we really need to formulate. And who knows, the next commandant might find out that there's a little light tank that the Marines are going to want. I hope.
Well, sir, like I said, I truly thank you for making the time to come on here and all the work you've done behind the scenes. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I've pretty much, I mean, I could talk more about the flame tank and, only shooting 100 yards and having to, be in front of the enemy. You can't be a mile away. And it's, I got an RPG, almost creased my helmet one time. And, just there's a,
we got time. Let's hear it. Let's set that stage for us.
All right. So we're on this Operation Thor with the 9th Marine Regiment, and we're out in the DMZ and probably North Vietnamese 60 millimeter mortars, 52 millimeter, whatever. Anyway, they start shooting mortars at us in the grunts and as we're going into this big tree line, and all of a sudden a couple of machine guns start shooting, and I told my driver to move forward, but he saw that there were grunts lying down on the ground in front of us. So I reached way out and I said, "Get out of the way!" And they rolled out of the way. And just as he started going forward, I felt this hot flash on my face. And I had my head out of the turret. Mm-hmm. Not very far, but I had my head out of the turret. And because we have no vision, the flame tank had no vision rings. We had these 3 little portholes. And that was it, looking outside. So anyway, I felt this warmth on my face. And I went, wow, that's weird. Went in and attacked the tree line and actually burned out a machine gun nest and yada, yada, yada. And that evening, we're back in the perimeter of the formation, if you will. And the platoon sergeant of the Foxtrot 29, the platoon sergeant comes up and second platoon and comes up and says, "Did you see that RPG?" And I went, "Huh?" And he said, "It missed the top of your helmet by about a half an inch." So me telling the driver to move forward got me close enough to where it missed us. It probably would have hit me in the face, or it would have hit right here. But and whoa! And of course, I didn't sleep for about 3 nights after that. But it was, and of course, I didn't see it coming. I mean, all I felt was the warmth, and the firefight had just started, and it was pretty intense, but it had just started. So, and it was mostly the North Vietnamese shooting at us. But again, I think it was a rear element. I don't think it was a main force. We didn't find any bunkers in this specific area, so I think the bunkers were further away. Another time, toward the end of that operation, the engineers that had come with us had used all their C4 and used all their dynamite, and he used everything that they had, explosives, blowing up all these caches of North Vietnamese army weapons and arms and bullets and beans and bandages. So they found another bunker complex, and it was fairly near where we were. And this lieutenant jumped up on my, this grunt lieutenant jumped on my tank and says, "Come on, I'll bring one of my squads and we'll go take care of this bunker complex." So they got on the tank and we went out, and just as I was getting ready to fire, they got off the tank. And of course, one of the guys was taking pictures and whatever. And as soon as we shot the flame and burned up all the equipment in the bunkers, the North Vietnamese started shooting 152 millimeter cannons at us.
Wow.
And it was bedlam. But they saw the smoke. And they figured that there was a firefight going on. And so they were going to protect their guys. And so they, I'm sure there was no FO anywhere anyway. But anyway, so fast forward almost 40 years, I'm in Philadelphia. I'm at the Marine Corps birthday at Cookie's Tavern in Philadelphia. It's world famous. The Philadelphia police block off, it's a six lane street. They block off all but one lane, and it's blocked off for 2 blocks, and it's solid Marines, and it's from Lejeune and whatever, and drinking and having a good time. And after we had a couple beers and whatever, we went and got cheesesteaks. We went, and one of the guys that was with said, "Hey, let's go see Tommy." I said, "Okay, where's Tommy?" He said, "Tommy's got to take care of his mom, but he was with 2-9." And I went, "Oh, 2-9, I know 2-9." So we got up there, and Tommy and several of his other buddies that were in 2-9 with him were there. And it turns out they were my tank's squad protection. They were my tank. And in his book, he's got all the pictures. And there I am in his book. 40 years later, there I am in his book.
That's incredible.
And the tank commander's cupola, whatever. It was really, I've got those pictures. He finally got me the pictures, but it was just small world. So the flame tank, the manual says that it can shoot a flame 300 yards. Okay. The best I've ever saw with a tailwind was probably 100 yards.
Wow.
So you have to get up close and personal. And as soon, not every time, but as soon as the flame starts, the Vietnamese have this thing about being burned up. It's a religious thing. They aren't supposed to be burned up. They don't cremate. And if you get cremated, you go to hell. So everybody starts shooting at the flame tank if the flame tanks are. So you have to get that rod out, and you have to get the flame out right away, and then get the hell out of there. But yeah, it was pretty intense.
Wow. Sir, thank you very much for coming on here. Like I said, your stories are absolutely incredible, truly valuable. And I appreciate the time that you made with me today with the channel. And to the subscribers, thank you so much. We continue to grow each day, and it's through your subscriptions that we gain momentum, and more people are able to enjoy these stories and these memories that these true American heroes have presented to us. If you've not already done so, please do subscribe. Hit the notification bell for new notifications. And with that, sir, Semper Fi, thank you so much again. And it's been an honor.
Semper Fi, JR. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank
It's
you.
been my pleasure. Absolutely.
Hurrah.